Hello and welcome to another episode of the OPUS WealthStyle podcast. My name is Iván Watanabe, and I'm here again with two of my great partners, Russ and Evan. What's going on, fellas? How are you?
Doing great. It's been a while.
I know, right? So again, we're excited to have a conversation with you, Russ, just to really gauge your insight and the wealth of knowledge that you are, to just talk about investments, right? But private equity investments or investments outside of a traditional sort of brokerage account or our normal sort of scope of the way we see investing, really just to gain your insights as to how you've made decisions for yourself and your family over the years. Um, we'd love your take on how you make those assessments as you include them in your portfolio.
Sure.
In other words, how do you evaluate something that you're not really an expert in?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think that, we all have a relationship with money that's a bit different. And mine always was, there was some number that I had in my head that I said, wow, if I could get to that number, I know that, and as an entrepreneur with, income that can vary, I wanted to make sure that I would be able to live a really good quality of life, on a go forward basis. So I probably was very, very driven and very conservative to kind of save along the way in more traditional vehicles until I got to that number. And I also think that a lot of this conversation around how do you evaluate stems from, as a person who got into business and you have older people or clients around you, you learn a lot from them, right? Because we're advising them and you say, wow, like, how did you make that decision? Like, what was going through your head, And if someone's kind of a gambler mentality, they take shots and, probably doesn't work as often as, it does work. And you learn a lot about what you don't want to do or how not to do it. So, I had this kind of in my mind, this core. I had a client one time and he was he was a doctor, very successful. He said, my whole life, all I wanted to do is that if I could get $10 million in muni bonds at 8%, I'm done. And I was thought about it, that was, you're talking a long time ago, right? But that was his bogey. And, we all have our own bogey. So I stayed in my lane, trying to just increase my revenue every year, save as much as possible into core vehicles. And as you get a little older, then these non-traditional platforms become available to you, and you have to figure out and try to assess whether they fit or not.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is you sort of stuck to your core competencies, your core tendencies, your things that were comfortable, that you knew a lot about, got to a certain place, and then started inviting that additional opportunity, risk, things that may be outside of your comfort zone into your portfolio. Is that, am I hearing that right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if I had a subset of 100 clients and 70% of them kind of follow that, I knew that they would be able to weather any storm because they were basically moving along in that direction. The other 30 could be really wealthy and then really poor. And they made decisions that seemed to be more like a crapshoot. And I also felt a real sense of responsibility to my family to say, like, I don't want to jeopardize our future by going into something that, quote unquote, could provide me with a greater rate of return. I think the other part of it is that, how much do I want to complicate my life? There are people that, will say, I'm in all these real estate deals. And if they're really good at it, they're very successful, but that comes with a very, very high degree of complication and management and things of that nature. So I shied away from the majority of those until my kids really were just in college or halfway through college. And by the nature of our business and being around people who become more successful because we work with them, there are deals that will be put in front of you. And you have a good question. How do you assess that? Well, the best thing you can do is speak to people who have been in them in the past or people who are experts and say, what do you think about this? Or this came my way. I'm not sure. Should I do it? Should I not do it? What kind of return will I get? What are the tax implications? But if I really didn't know anything about it, I never did it.
How much of it was your of the ones that you did invest in, of the non-public investments that you did invest in, was any part of it you making bets on like the macro economy of what you think the next 5 or 2 or 5 years looks like, or was it just more so based off of your, you had some extra money, and seemed like smart people?
Yeah, it was never the latter. It was always the former, in the sense of, what do I know about this business? What don't I know about this business? Who else do I know has been successful in it? What's my gut tell me, right? I do a big gut check on it. And I saw, when I first came into the business, some associates that had made a lot of money, and they went into the silliest things ever, and they didn't work. And then they would kind of joke about it. And I asked them, well, how do you joke about that? You just lost the money. And it was a very, very interesting lesson, is I never go into something like that expecting I'm going to get any money out of it. So I'm expecting I could lose it. And I think if you go in with that mentality, it takes the bar down of how much you're going to put at risk. And if it passes all the other tests, then, you say, okay, I can afford to lose this money, and it's not going to change my trajectory or my goals, or, paying for kids' college and things of that nature.
Right. Because you just mentioned, sort of waiting until the kids were out of college or halfway through college, right? At that point, the stakes are low, right? When your kids are little and they've got their whole lives that you have to pay for to raise them, the stakes are super high for the family, right? But once they're at that stage, the stakes are lower. Now you feel like you can take more risk, and that's what I see. I feel like I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, and you're gonna look. Your world's going to get smaller as you get older, and you're going to gravitate to a bunch of core people that are like you, that have, or people have resources, excess resources to invest, and you start to collaborate, and you start thinking about it and talking about it. And all of a sudden, it's just not as ominous, because someone may say, hey, I want to go into a real estate deal, and I'm in the real estate business, and, it is going to be a 3-timer going in, and here's the strategy. And they've been super successful at doing it, and it's kind of a friends and family deal. And you say, okay, I'm going to put X amount of dollars into it. You have much more view of what it will be. And back to your question, Evan, it has to sync up with the macroeconomics of what's going on in the world. Like, because I have a healthcare consulting practice, I knew to buy United Healthcare and Oxford 15 years ago. And people say, well, how did you know? I said, well, every day I'm dealing with every company that needs to have healthcare, number one. And number two, believe it or not, it may seem silly, I knew to buy them when they ran out of applications. They had no applications. You couldn't get an application. They said, we have to print them. We don't have enough. It's going to be 2 weeks from now. And I'm like, wow, that demand is way greater than my world. And that stock has done tremendously. That wasn't private equity, but those are the things, like what's going on, in the world. You have to do your homework.
Warren Buffett, I've heard him talk about, one of the, I guess, first rules of investing is, or second rule, whatever, is don't lose money. And so, I guess do you think about it as balancing? I guess it depends on where you are and what stage you are in life and how much risk you're willing to take on. But getting diversification and all these different private investments versus, picking and choosing very selectively, just a handful. It's like you kind of want both. You know what I mean?
You do, but honestly, picking and choosing, or being in those investments with the mentality, I'm not going to lose money, is the best thing I can tell you. When you have these flyers, they often don't work. And you look back and go, oh God, how come I didn't see that? But I never put a lot of money at risk in it. I've come out ahead on those deals, overall, because the ones that saved me were the real great core ones, like, a real estate play, not, a technology play. That, there was so much outside of my control, so much I didn't know about it, but I got caught up in the moment of going, well, I've got to put $25,000 into that thing. And, the ROI has been terrible, but it's okay because I made money over here. So I think it's balanced. You have to kind of look and say, well, how much of my overall portfolio am I willing to put into this space? And of that space, how much of it am I willing to put into something that I really don't know much about? And honestly, you should never put money into something that you don't know much about. You should talk to as many people as you can about it and what impacts. And again, that world gets smaller. There's some very smart people, and you might have 3 or 4 really close friends that you can bounce something off. You'll know at the end of those conversations whether you should do it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of it, again, it just goes to expectation, right? What do I actually think this is going to do? And am I comfortable with that particular rate of return? Is it going to explode? Is it going to, go to zero? And what's the impact if it does either of those things, right? And most importantly, if it goes to zero, how does that impact me and my family, and what, the plans are that we have going forward?
One of the things I think a lot about it with private investments is it's just a totally different, it's a much longer time horizon, time frame, right, than typical public investments, and much less liquidity as a general rule of thumb, right? Is that fair assessment?
Yeah, there's no question. If they think they're going to get out in 3 years, you should assume it's 6.
Yeah,
and it could be longer. But again, my world on the healthcare side is private equity. I mean, I work with private equity firms. I see their portfolios. I see conversations of, hey, we sold this and we did really well, or we thought it was going to be 3 years, but we're now in year 6, or so there are people that you create relationships with, and you can say, hey, I want to bounce something off of you in general. You get a perspective that you can never get outside of that. So I've seen what private equity has done to the economy, how it's created tremendous expansion, jobs, things of that nature, and it being very profitable. But even in any portfolio or GP will tell you, not every one of their companies is profitable.
Sure.
There are some that they thought was going to do this, and then all of a sudden something changed. So you have to diversify within that space. But I would just tell you, if someone comes and says, oh, you have to do it, it's got to be funded by next Tuesday, unless you know that thing inside and out, don't get caught up in the moment of a 5-time, 10-time, 20-timer. You've got to really understand what's going on in the world, what the demand is for that, who's running it. Really, that's really important. Who's running this? What are they like? Right? Do your homework. And then if you feel comfortable, go. And who else has been in it? I'd like to speak to 4 or 5 other people who've been in your other deals. It tells you so much more than the subscription agreement that they're going to send you.
Yeah, I think that management aspect of it is huge. I mean, you and I have looked at opportunities and saying, hey, this idea is great, but the people running it are, the execution of this is not going to work out. Right.
Yeah.
Or we didn't have a ton of faith in the people that were executing the deal. So, ultimately participating didn't make a lot of sense. But I think that is absolutely part of the evaluation.
It's a big part, because how they run their life and what they need as far as income is concerned is going to absolutely impact how that company, where the end game is, right? Because they can impact it. Right? If someone's coming and raising money, and they've got a high flying lifestyle, you got to be really careful. They have to certainly operate within the limits of the law, but somewhere along the line, that is going to spill over into judgment, and you definitely want to be very careful of that.
Yeah. Over the years, is there one particular investment that either, was a big mistake, or one that either you missed out on an opportunity or you lost in an opportunity? Is there one in particular that sort of you can think of, or that sort of that you've learned from?
Well, there were 2 small ones that went completely south that I didn't see coming. I said, oh no. And then the ones that won, 10 of my friends were in and had been in for 10 years, and they did great. And then I'd play golf with the guy who was, running it. And I'd play a couple of times. I really wanted to get to know, who that person was, because they were influencing things. And as soon as I got comfortable with it, I went, never lost any money, and, made a fair amount of money, great return within a reasonable, almost like they said it was going to be this, and it was this. So you only need to, kind of get burned once, and doesn't matter if it's $5,000, you just sit there and go, yeah, didn't really, went into that one a little blind, or I thought I knew what the outcome was going to be.
Yeah. So I think, basically what you're saying is getting comfortable with and spending the time and the energy to get familiar with the underlying investment has proved out to be, valuable for you.
Yeah. I say no way more than I say yes. And I'm completely, as you get older, you say more no's, because, you're at a point where you say, well, how many years do I want to keep grinding to kind of replace that if it goes the wrong way? But it's all about, what's the history? Who are the people running it? What's their track record? Why are they in it? How much of their own money do they have in it? Big deal, right? That diligence is really, really important. But I don't think I went into any of those alternative investments until I was probably 50 years old. And I started in the business when I was 22.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So of the ones that you've said no to, maybe more recently, what are the things that, like, what are the red flags that you said that have you say no?
I said no because I really didn't understand the space.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't get to the people who were really running it to understand who they were. And I knew that it was a little bit of a, it was the industry of choice at the moment, which, may not have had the level of, grounded into the economy. You really couldn't measure it.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and even in healthcare, there's so many new advancements coming out, and people coming out, you say, oh, I have a blood analyzer, I have this, I have that. It means nothing. Like, what does that mean? How does it translate into profitability? Where's it going? What's your marketing strategy? I learned so much from the guys and gals that run the deal teams in these private equity, because they're the ones who have to go to the GP and say, we think this is a good deal.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, why? And they tell them, and I pick their brain. A lot of them are my friends. I really pick their brain and say, what do you think about this? And I'm amazed at what I didn't think about that they do every day. Mm-hmm. And then they kind of go back and say, here's the deal. And that's why I say no. If I get pitched 10 deals in a year, I could go into none or one. Rarely do I ever go into two. And right now, I might have 3 that are in my world that I went in at a reasonable level. And 2 of the 3 are doing really well. One is we don't know.
Got it. Well, Russ, again, man, I appreciate you coming on. I'm sure it's been valuable for the audience as well. For you, the listening audience, thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Make sure to click subscribe below to be notified when we have further podcast episodes. Appreciate you guys.
Yeah,
thanks, Russ.
Thank you.